I go to the front door in the morning and I see this red dust all over the front of my house. I check my cameras and I saw a gentleman on there that came to my house in the middle of the night. He sprinkled something all over my front door, left this manifesto, cut some of my bushes in my front yard.
I had one man who owned a gun store in our community who would literally call my campaign team to find out where I was doing an event and threaten to show up with a weapon.
I was driving and hit actually a speed bump and my window crashed and ended up going back and looking and finding a bullet in my car. So found out someone had shot my windows out.
People were posting photos of my home online and my address online. And there were comments like, "We will just take over her house." That was around the time that the January 6th situation had happened at the Capitol. And so when I heard take over, I'm just kind of anxious and expecting the worst.
January 6th put a spotlight on intimidation and violence against public officials. The insurrection got a lot of attention, as have other threats against national figures. We wondered, what's happening to local and state officials? We found that this abuse is happening across the board. More than 40% of state legislators experience threats of harm, and 2 in 5 report that the amount of abuse they've experienced has increased in recent years. This abuse weakens our democracy. Political violence is distorting the public debate.
Some people could feel so threatened that they don't want to speak out on the things that they were elected to speak out about.
Secure storage is ultimately about gun responsibility, and that's something that
we have been elected by our people to represent their voice. And so when you're creating an atmosphere where you're getting punished or you're getting harassed for doing your job, that is not what democracy should be or should stand for.
The threat of violence and future violence, the way it has shaped my work in the Capitol is that now I feel like I have to make a conscious decision to continue the work, which I've decided to do. We need to question if this person can responsibly manage and possess these weapons. I know for some of my colleagues, they've had stalkers, they've had people who need to sit, people need to sit outside of their house to keep them safe. And I know they make that decision and they do it anyway, because that's how important it is that we are there.
We were passing marriage equality in an era of mass shootings, and we are one of the only state houses in the country that doesn't have metal detectors. And it's a huge kind of auditorium style seating arrangement with balconies across the entire back. And many of us, did feel unsafe and didn't have the same ability to just sit there and swell with pride at what we were doing. We were ready to get out of sight.
State legislators have to think about rising political violence when they interact with their constituents. Due to abuse, more than 1 in 5 say they are less willing to have events in public spaces. Nearly half of state legislators say that abuse has reduced their willingness to post on social media. That's one less space for voters to learn what their representatives are fighting for. One less place to ask their leaders direct questions.
I voted no on a bill that would ban vaccine mandates from employers. And after that, I just had tons of really hateful emails, phone calls, and I attended several meetings where people were making threats. But because of that, I was actually asked by our security team to cancel several appointments with constituents who had attended the meeting where threats were received.
This issue affects everyone, but not in the same ways, especially for members of marginalized communities. For local office holders, the amount and severity of abuse reported was significantly higher for women and people of color.
I do think the type of harassment that I think has stuck with me is because of identifying as a Black woman. I've had men reach out to me and tell me where a woman's place is. I am a legislator who runs bills about dismantling these systems that lead to these disproportionate outcomes. And so that is why I believe the types of threats and harassment I get always start with the N-word. They don't start with the policy.
I was speaking out against the trans-affirming healthcare ban bill for youth, and I went down to the floor of the House, and I was passionate.
This bill should not pass. This is wrong. I am trying to appeal to you that this is not small government, that this is invasive.
After that ended up kind of going viral, and I started seeing a lot of kind of hatred and name calling and pretty rough things being thrown my way.
Threats, harassment, and other abuse affects how representative our democracy is. 50% of state legislators believe that abuse could deter their colleagues from running for other offices. And office holders are concerned this will dissuade new candidates from underrepresented groups.
It has been very difficult to recruit candidates for this upcoming election cycle. I've noticed it more this year than any other year that I've been involved in trying to get women and people of color to run for office. That's really unfortunate because we need more women in the legislature. We need more mothers in the legislature. Those are real life stories that she could be bringing to the state capitol and making great impact, positive impact on policies that we discuss here.
It's important for folks to see folks like me, whether they're younger or whether they're LGBTQ or whether they just care about equity and justice, to be running for office or to be in office, because I think it's important for them to know that there is somebody that has their back.
It was really scary as a mom of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old to think I could show up to work today and somebody who's mad about politics could take my kid's mom away from them. I pray that nobody ever has to show up to work having to have those conversations, especially knowing that you're just trying to show up to do public good. I think about wanting to be that force for good for some little girl 10 years down the road who's never going to meet me, but knows that there's a mom in the legislature fighting to make sure that she gets the same access to resources, the same opportunity to dream big. I get up every day hoping that I can play a little small part in that work.
We can all stand up against abuse. We can all support resources for office holder safety, and we can all support common sense gun restrictions in places where we debate policy. It's on all of us to ensure a safe, accessible, and representative democracy.